They call it executive isolation. At 500 feet above the pavement, the world changes. The sounds of the city, the sirens, the tires on wet asphalt, the distant shouting, they don't reach you here. Up here, in the glass towers of corporate America, the only thing you hear is the building itself, the groan of the steel, the whistle of the vents, and the silence. For Elias Vance, a night shift data analyst, the 50th floor was a sanctuary. He liked the distance. He felt like a god looking down on a miniature world. But on March 12th, the sanctuary became a cage. This is the recovered log of case file 305. If you are watching this, you were witnessing the final 8 minutes of an event the Aethelgard Corporation spent millions to bury. Pay close attention to the glass, because at this height there should be nothing on the other side. Elias's routine was surgical. Arrive at 11 p.m., brew a pot of black coffee, filter through 3,000 lines of logistics data, leave at 7 a.m. before the sun touched the horizon. He never looked out the window, not because he was afraid, but because at 3 a.m. there was nothing to see but a black void and his own reflection. But that Tuesday was different. The wind was hitting the north face of the tower at 55 miles per hour. The building was swaying just a few inches, but enough to make the coffee in his mug ripple. He looked up from his monitor, eyes strained from the blue light. That's when he heard it. A rhythmic tapping. Ting, ting, ting. It wasn't the building settling. It was localized. It was coming from the window directly behind his desk. A sound like a diamond ring hitting reinforced glass. Elias turned around. At first he saw nothing, just the flickering lights of the city below. Then he stood up and walked toward the pane. He reached out his hand, expecting to feel the cold interior glass, but his eyes caught something, a smudge, a greasy, grayish fog on the window. He wiped the glass with his sleeve. The smudge didn't move. He realized with a jolt of ice in his chest that the mark was on the outside. He leaned in closer, his nose almost touching the barrier. It wasn't just a smudge. It was a palm print. Long, slender fingers. No fingerprints. Just a smooth, oily impression pressed against a window 50 floors above the nearest solid ground. Elias froze. His brain began to scream for a logical explanation. A window washer? No, the wind was too high. A prank? Impossible. As he stared at the print, a flash of lightning illuminated the sky. Elias stood paralyzed in the center of the office. The logic he had built his entire career on was failing him. He told himself it was an optical illusion, perhaps the way the office lights were hitting the condensation on the glass. He took 3 slow, deliberate steps toward the window. Each footstep felt heavy, as if the air in the room had become thick like water. He wiped the interior glass with his palm, desperate to see it vanish. But the print remained on the outside, mocking him. Above the roar of the wind, he began to hear a new sound. Not a tap, but a scrape. The sound of a long, sharp nail dragging slowly across the reinforced exterior. It was a sound that shouldn't exist 50 floors up. It was the sound of something claiming the space. Elias didn't move. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on the void beyond the glass. And then the world went white. When the light returned, Elias wasn't looking at his reflection anymore. He was looking at it, a silhouette so thin it seemed two-dimensional, clinging to the vertical glass like an insect. Its skin was the color of a drowned man, pale and translucent under the red emergency lights. Elias staggered back, tripping over his ergonomic chair. He scrambled for his phone, but the screen was a mess of static and signal error icons. He looked back at the window. The creature hadn't moved its body, but its head. Its head was tilted at a 90-degree angle. It was watching him through the glass. No eyes, just deep, hollow pits of shadow where a face should be. He realized then that the tapping wasn't an accident. It was an invitation. It wanted him to come closer. It wanted him to see the impossibility of its existence. Elias felt a strange, cold pull in his chest. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was a morbid curiosity that defied every survival instinct he possessed. He found himself leaning forward, his forehead almost touching the glass, mirroring the creature on the other side. He noticed the way the light from his computer monitor reflected off the creature's skin. It didn't look like flesh. It looked like wet marble, or perhaps something pulled from the pressurized depths of the midnight ocean. He realized then that the window wasn't there to keep the creature out. It was there to keep him in. He was the specimen in the jar, and the thing outside was simply waiting for the glass to vanish. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't watching a monster. He was watching his own executioner. In the world of data, everything has a cause and effect. But as Elias watched the creature's long, fingerless hand slide slowly down the glass, his logic shattered. The creature began to move. It didn't climb. It shifted, its body defying gravity as it repositioned itself. The sound was the worst part. Above the roar of the rain, Elias heard a low, vibrating hum coming through the glass. It sounded like 1,000 bees trapped in a jar. The creature pressed its face against the pane. The reinforced, double-layered glass began to frost over where its breath should have been. But the frost was black, a crystalline rot spreading across the window. Elias realized the creature wasn't trying to get in. It was waiting for the building to fail. It was waiting for the 50th floor to become the ground floor. At 3:14 a.m., the security feed for Sector 4 went dark. The last recorded audio from Elias Vance was not a scream. It was a whisper. He was heard saying, "It's not outside. It's the glass." When the morning shift arrived at 7 a.m., the office was pristine. The coffee was still in the mug. The monitor was still on, but Elias was gone. The window was perfectly clean, no palm prints, no black frost, no scratches. The only evidence left behind was a single deep fracture in the center of the window. A crack that started from the outside and stopped exactly where Elias's desk was positioned. They say that if you work late enough in the Aethelgard Tower, you shouldn't look at your reflection, because sometimes the person looking back isn't you. Sometimes it's just something from the void, waiting for a high enough floor to let it in. Case file 305 remains unresolved.